So, sir, how did your prediction went wrong? Let us start with this.
Yeah. No, I think, look, my analysis, and obviously I've been thinking like all others who got it wrong, and most of us got it wrong, as to what happened. And I think the analysis was completely correct. I have for the last 30, 40 years, built on the analysis has been built on economics that drives a result. And that indeed is the last line of the book, How We Vote, which says it's the economic stupid. And I think this time, clearly, the economics did not work out. That is to say, the economic analysis was right, the economics was right, but it is the political factors that dominated the election result. So we're talking about something like, 50, 60 seats, not a large amount in a 543 strong Lok Sabha, but it was politics. And I think all of us, and that's what I wrote subsequently, have to do, find out what was the politics. It's easy to say it's not economics, but the next step is if it's not economics, it is politics. So what were the politics? And I try to point out that one element of politics was polarization. And what is coming out and was coming out before, that there was polarization of rather extreme nature, such that one that didn't happen in 2019. Polarization is always there, but I gave the example of Karnataka, where again, at the last end, polarization came in and it didn't work. So I think it's time for all of us. And the last point I want to make on that is not that the opposition won the election, won in the sense of doing much better than what was expected. It's that the BJP lost the election.
So the opposition, in this regard, they were saying that the exit polls and all the predictions that were made in BJP's headquarters. Do you agree with that? That these are influenced by some political force or something like that?
One, I think it's completely wrong. Second, my book was written in January, February. And BJP headquarters had precious little involvement, and nor did the others. If indeed, discussions with all of the people seem to suggest that the analysis was broadly on the right track. And if you will, if you look in the book, we say that that the record and the complete analysis is presented of how state elections that were before and only in October, November last year influenced, and the aggregate of all state elections between 2019 and 2024, including obviously Karnataka, including all of the others, suggested that there would be a swing of around 5%. Now that had nothing to do with BJP or any other party. So I'm afraid those people who make those, are being very lazy and not thinking as to what really happened. It's always easy to say you got it wrong, and all the sophologists have admitted, and they can't do anything else but admit they got it wrong. They got it wrong. Now, why did it happen is the important point.
Right.
And what went wrong in the calculations? And I'm saying there was nothing. I challenge anybody to show me any economic variable that is worse now than it was in 2019. So obviously the most recent election is the relevant one, whether you look at unemployment, whether you look at inflation, whether you look at growth, it is much, or whether you look at our international standing. I challenge them. You should ask them which variable, economic variable, at a national level, and then we can go to the state levels, but at a national level, worsened. And I haven't heard any of these people come up with, they're not interested, it seems, in trying to analyze what happened. They're just saying, you got it wrong, and because it was BJP.
So I was reading somewhere, you had said that it was during the rule of NDA that a record number of employment was generated, which has not happened in any of the governments before.
Yeah, yeah. And
how do you see that?
And that paper is now, formal paper is going to come out. And it really is quite incredible, the number of jobs that have been created in the last 5 years. And we know that from the PLFS national surveys are held every year. So you can actually look at what has happened. And the other instance of jobs being created was during the Vajpayee period. Indeed, 2004 to 2011 is when the Congress, or the UPA was in power, is the weakest ever in Indian history of job growth. Okay. And as we know, the Congress increased its tally in 2009 over that. So if you're looking at job growth, you've got to, it's really been a sterling performance. And why the job growth? Look at the amount of infrastructure investment that has taken place, a record amount. So, you can't have infrastructure, you can't have construction out of thin air. There are workers involved. So, that's what, unfortunately, I think maybe it is in the entire world that social media amplifies these mistakes of analysts, because everybody is king for 1 day or 2 days, and you can stand on the pulpit and say whatever. And that's unfortunate. And actually, I pointed that out in the book. This was a real trend in world affairs, whether you look at the US, whether you look at India, whether you look at England, and elections everywhere. Social media seems to get a lot more importance than reality.
Now, the question arises, sir, that although NDA has returned to power with third straight historic term, but the fact of the matter is that BJP has fallen short of majority. And considering the work that they had done in their previous 2 terms, they had majority. So is the coalition going to have a negative impact on economic growth or the developmental work that the government will do?
And the short answer is no. It won't have a negative impact. Let me expand on that a little bit. Look, basically, let's forget about what happened in India prior to 1991. Okay. So since 1991, in 1991, we had a coalition government by Narasimha Rao, which led to very significant economic reforms. Okay. Right. And the next time, even in the period of the UPA 96 to 98, you had a major economic reform in form of the income tax cuts. Okay, the dream budget, remember that in 90. So that was in a coalition government. Then you have Vajpayee from 99 to 2004, and you had some significant monetary policy as well as other fiscal policy reforms and the beginning of the use of, if you will, a big step jump up in infrastructure investment, the national rail. Then, so therefore, there are three terms of coalition governments that brought in reform, very different from the past when there was no reform. I think the interesting period of coalition governments and why you are asking that question as to why wouldn't this have an impact is 2004 to 2014, when you had a coalition government and you had negative reforms, economic reforms. Okay, so that's what I think is in everybody's mind. Then look, 2004 to 14, you had negative economic reforms. It was a coalition government, and maybe the same thing will happen now. I think, we have moved a long way from the 2004 to 2014 negative reforms, economic reforms, and everybody accepts that economic reforms is the way to go. Now, so therefore I feel quite confident that economic reforms will continue, that this will be a stable government. And I think the sharp edges that we've just talked about, the non-economic edges of the government, will be eliminated, will be contained, and it'll be much more economics that will now drive the system. And therefore, I think I'm very optimistic, hopeful, and I think I will be right in terms of economic reforms continuing in the new administration.
Coalition makes tough reforms feasible as it opens space for dialogue. Is it so, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I mean. There will be checks and balances. The phrase I like to use is it provides for checks and balances. So you can't go off the main path. So what you have to ask is, are the coalition partners? So we know that Mr. Modi and the BJP are very committed to economic reforms. We've got a 10-year record of pushing for economic reforms. Now, as I pointed out, others have pointed out, there are some economic policies that need changing. And I'm very hopeful that that will happen. So it doesn't mean that whatever they've done is correct. No. But I think the broad thrust is for more economic reforms. And the coalition partners, and PDP in particular, are very, very pro-economic reforms, and including Nitish. So I think all the systems go for continuation and enhancement of economic reforms. And, there is a direct tax reform that is much needed. I think, as I pointed out with my colleague, our co-author, Karan Bhasin, that, in terms of foreign direct investment has declined in India. And we have to look at why that is the case and rectify. Let me just speak a little. Foreign direct, it's not as if India needs money and therefore foreign direct investment. What foreign direct investment brings in is expertise, technological advances, and connection. This is a global world. You can't produce just for the Indian market. You have to produce globally. So therefore, our industrialists are not all of them are at the frontier. So what foreign direct investment allows you is to get to the frontier. And I think so therefore there are economic reforms that are needed. Farm laws, which again was tried very hard by the BJP, by Mr. Modi, and didn't happen. I am hoping that farm laws will be back and with a bang, I hope. So I think there's a lot to look forward to in terms of economic reform.